the sun's attractive field has turned around. We have entered the solar maximum, and this could lead to intense changes. The sun is now sending storms more vicious than ever before, and fears are growing on Earth that a final solar storm could obliterate our satellites. Space entrepreneurs like Elon Musk are preparing for the worst, and NASA is also issuing alerts almost daily about new dangers from the sun. At no other time have we experienced as many violent solar storms as in the last few months. We are in the year 2024, heading toward the solar maximum. Experts don't expect the most intense activity on the sun until 2025. Considering this, some satellites are already at their limits. The year 2025 could bring some shocks. In the summer of 2024, Elon Musk posted pictures of the stress curves of his Starlink satellites with alarm. The brand new satellite network had barely managed to endure the siege from the sun. But what happens next? Researchers expect the absolute peak of the current solar cycle in 2025. Among the forecasts is a terrifying storm that could plunge all of us into unimaginable chaos. We have reached the solar maximum. It has never been as severe as it is now. The sun has reached a level of activity causing intense storms nearly every day. NASA has confirmed the inversion of the sun's magnetic field. These changes are entirely expected in the case of the sun, but they are happening within an 11-year cycle instead of 22.5 years. As a result of these pole reversals, violent turmoil occurs in the lower layers of the sun. The current solar cycle is called Solar Cycle 25, and it brings especially intense activity on the surface of the sun. On May 1, 2024, an unusually large sunspot appeared, named Active Region 3664. This sunspot grew to 3 times the size of Earth in just a few days. The spot formed due to internal disturbances. Sunspots appear darker to us than the rest of the sun because of cooling in the area of the spots. In the lower section, a sort of cavity is formed by strong flows. Layers break down, creating a slight indentation, which is cooler than the surrounding region. These phenomena are accompanied by intense solar flares and coronal mass ejections, CMEs. During the flares or eruptions, large amounts of charged particles are ejected from the sun's surface and blown toward us as powerful flows. When the particles reach Earth's magnetic field, they are funneled to the poles. Earth has a magnificent protective system. These act like collection bags for particles trapped in layers of the planet's atmosphere. Our home planet spins the particles back and forth until they lose their charge. We see this display as auroras. Typically, the northern and southern lights only appear in polar regions, but this year, everything has changed. We've seen auroras in areas where they don't usually appear. One of the strongest geomagnetic storms in the last 500 years caused incredible auroras visible as far south as the Mediterranean, Australia, and Hawaii. NASA is concerned about the strongest solar flare in 7 years. NASA specialists worry for the safety of the International Space Station, ISS, and various satellites in space. Solar storms can severely disrupt technical equipment in space. If vital supply systems on the ISS fail, it could be tight for astronauts. Stars of space shuttles or supply transports are also hampered during storms. If significant satellites fail, we will no longer be able to obtain up-to-date information from space, and our communication systems could collapse. The damage could be immense. Right now, nobody knows how safe NASA's technical facilities truly are. It's a daily quake and dread at NASA, but also at companies like SpaceX and other organizations and countries that have placed significant satellites in space. In October 2024, the shock came. The sun produced an X9.5 flare. We need to expect even more intense storms. Geomagnetic storms of level G4 could then be the next occurrence. Storms of this strength have a significant impact on radio communication and can trigger. The appearance of the Aurora Borealis at surprising scopes essentially results from the sun's activity. Our sun goes through a cycle every 11 years, first with low movement and afterward with expanded activity. The quantity of sunspots increases, solar radiation becomes more intense, and the mood of the magnetic field inversion changes. The sun cycles have been known since the late 18th century. The Carrington event was a solar storm that would stun any average person and prompted a concentrated investigation into solar activity and its impact on current progress on Earth. The violent solar storm of 1859 debilitated the still youthful messaging system and caused confusion and panic worldwide. The sky burned for quite a long time. Sparks flew from technical equipment, and people were apprehensive. The scare went on for weeks. Since that point, we humans have had significant awareness of the dangers of the sun for our modern development. Creatures and plants probably wouldn't be affected by the flows, but electrical systems can experience a breakdown. Today, we rely upon power 100%. If the overall power supply and satellite-based communication systems were to fail, we could face catastrophe. The impact on Earth will increase. NASA recently raised the interesting question of whether increased solar activity could influence the world's global temperature. We are on the edge of an environmental disaster, and, of course, people are contemplating whether extreme solar activity could fuel the issues. The increased radiation could hypothetically disturb electrical systems and satellite communications. However, no consequences for the environment have been seen to date. The charge of the particles that contact us from the sun isn't dramatic enough to make the air warm. Temperatures and weather conditions would most likely remain relatively unaffected by violent solar storms. The main things impacted are satellites, technical establishments in Earth's orbit, and delicate electrical systems on Earth. Anyway, scientists are still not certain whether solar storms of this magnitude could impact nature, creatures, or even us humans, or whether they could somehow speed up the greenhouse effect. NASA trusted the best specialists of the planet to address this pressing question. The question remains, how can we protect ourselves? The answer to this can only be, not at all. We can do nothing about the discharges from the sun and flares. We can change our approach to climate change and protect our electrical systems. Our world has changed since 1859. At that time, there was only a countrywide broadcast system and the first generators that produced power. People didn't yet know an electrical system as we know it today: lights, fridges, or power-dependent ATMs and general stores. The famous Carrington event is considered one of the strongest solar storms ever recorded because of the breakdown of the communication system. It took a very long time for the news of the solar storm to circulate around the world. In remote parts of the USA, no one knew what had happened at that time. Essentially, the North American continent was impacted when sparks flew from the messages and caused fires. The sky was aglow, and people saw unusual colors. People thought it was some sort of end times. Only the English scientist Richard Carrington had seen that a dark spot had appeared on the sun before the highly sensitive situation. Carrington accurately connected the two and sent the news about his discovery all over the world. If we were hit by a storm on the scale of the Carrington event today, our human civilization would be on the ground for a few days without power and functioning communication systems. Tumultuous circumstances would break out for days, and nobody knows when the day will come when the sun will create such a storm again. It's unnerving to think that a medium-sized burst from the sun can bring our culture close to collapse. For the sun's particle discharges like the one in 1859, scientists suspect that there have been extreme storms like this over the course of the Earth, but there were no records, or people simply didn't know much about them because there were no electrical gadgets. Scientists suspect that some descriptions of fire angels in the sky or religious ideas of a burning sky may be linked to past violent solar storms. Not even 200 years have passed from 1859 to now. The sun could produce such storms again and again. Scientists are working hard to record and predict the patterns of solar activity. Once again, specialists caution against making rushed promises. After all, we have only been observing the sun seriously for a very short time. We have been calculating over time, and over hundreds of years, we have no clue what cycles our star is subjected to or whether flares of the extent of the Carrington storm follow any sort of rhythm. The marvel of our planet's magnetic field. Do you ever think about how incredible it is that our planet has a magnetic field? Probably not. We enjoy the marvels of our home planet and all the luxuries it offers us every day without even thinking about it. It's only when solar storms or other disasters threaten that we realize how vulnerable we are in this world. Our planet's magnetic field is created inside the Earth. The hot liquid iron core reacts with the cooler outer layers, and the resulting friction creates a magnetic field. This includes the whole globe and forms poles at the north and south. There, the bombardment of particles from the sun is blocked, and this typically occurs as expected. We humans can even enjoy the beautiful Aurora Borealis. But what if our magnetic field were overloaded or collapsed entirely? We would have a difficult problem. We can tell you to some extent that much. Not only would the particle streams hit us harder, but without the magnetic field, the sun would likely obliterate our atmosphere within a few thousand years, so much so that life would become impossible. Mars has no magnetic field and thus no atmosphere. In our neighboring star system, Proxima Centauri, the exoplanet Proxima b has raised expectations that we have found an Earth-like planet outside the planetary group. But then, scientists noticed how the star sent such a savage flare to the planet that life and an atmosphere there are very unlikely.